Hello and welcome to Rock Your Block. This is the Holmes Radio edition of Rock Your Block, and I'm your host, James Jack. Holmes Radio, yeah. I don't know whether or not you've asked yourself at least once or twice, where did he come up with that idea, that name? Two simple little words, Holmes and Radio. Well, it's a long story, so if you've got a few minutes, I'm going to try to squeeze it all into that tight little neat package. Years ago, when I was in high school, I played in the high school band, and I was pretty good. I would like to think that I was one of the best, to the point that when everybody else was playing, I would stop sometimes and look around, and I would see my band director looking at me, but he wouldn't say anything. A few years ago, he and I had a conversation, and I asked, "Did you know that I sometimes would stop playing and just look around?" He says, "Yes, I knew." I said, "Well, I was just listening." And he said, "Not only were you listening, you were thinking." He says, "You were a thinker." And I thought to myself, maybe that's good. But sometimes, you know, you can outthink yourself and you'll find yourself in a quandary. Well, that's what happened when I went to college. I was walking across campus one night to the parking lot, to the freshman parking lot, which is way over on the other side, and I heard music coming from a building. So I kept walking, and the music got louder, and I found myself actually inside the building where the music was coming from, and I went up the stairs, and there it was, a radio studio. And I said, this looks interesting. So the guy who was on the air looked up at me and said, "You must be my replacement." And I said, "Yes, I am." So when he left, I sat down and I looked around and I said, "I can do this." So I did. So I turned a few of the knobs and I did some of this and some of that, not knowing what it was, and, you know, test, test, test. What is all of this about? Just laughing to myself. This was about midnight. And so I knew that nobody else was going to be coming around, so I had an opportunity to play. And play I did. The first song that I played was a tune by Dusty Springfield called "Brand New Me." I had heard the Jerry Butler version of it, and I knew about the Dusty Springfield version of it, so I said, okay, let's give it a whirl. I put it on the turntable, and I flipped a couple of switches, and it started turning, and I said, there you go. I could hear it through the speakers, and I said, I never thought I could do this. But looking back on it, I thought again, and I said, this was probably one of the first times I reinvented myself. Let's move on. The next semester, I dropped my music major and became an RTVF, radio, television, and film major. Not a good deal. Why? Because I made a sacrifice for something that I was very good at to do something that I knew nothing about. I really didn't like the curriculum. I didn't like the instructors. I didn't like it at all. But I liked the radio station, so I kept going to the radio station every night, and that meant I practiced less, and I was not keeping up with everybody else, but I thought, hey, it's me. It's my life. I can do whatever I want to. I had gotten bitten by the radio bug. The next semester, I was on suspension because my grades had fallen. So I said, maybe I need to find a job. I made an air check, which is a tape, an audition tape, and sent it to all the radio stations in town. Nothing. That was around June. The end of August, I got a call from this guy one afternoon. I was at home and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't get back into school. I was under suspension, and I was running out of money, and he said, "I would like to take you to dinner." So I said, okay, why not? Free meal. We went to dinner. He offered me a job on the radio. Heard my tape. He said, "You sound like crap, but we think you have the potential because we like the way you think about things." So I said, okay. I took the job. Loved it. 2 years later, they fired me. A good friend of mine who had been in radio for some time told me, when you got into this business, the one thing you did not understand was you need to start looking for your next job, because that's the nature of radio. Radio is like the law. It's a jealous mistress. It just does not have a heart at times, but have fun doing it. And I did for many, 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 many years. I'm reminded of a book that was written by Thomas Wolfe years ago. And in the book, the novel entitled You Can't Go Home Again, I think sometimes back on that and say to myself, I wonder how many mistakes did I make? I could never go back to being a musician or band director. Why? Because my heart really isn't in it. I can't go back to those radio stations that I worked at where, even though I thought I did a very good job and my ratings were very good, they fired me. Sometimes I quit. So I guess you could say we evened the score. But over a period of time, I really understood what Thomas Wolfe was talking about with the character George Weber, who wrote this really good book. And in the book, he talked about the town that he lived in and how it had really not kept up with the times. This was during the Depression era of the 20s and 30s. And as a result, the people in the town didn't like him. And I thought, they didn't like me in radio either. Well, some of them didn't. The others loved me. And I loved myself. So that was enough. However, I kept thinking about that. You can't go home again. Home, radio. You get the picture, I think. If not now, you will. So let's move on from Thomas Wolfe. You should read the book if you haven't. And you'll get a pretty good idea of what it's like to go back to your hometown if you, say, left someplace in Nebraska or Tennessee, and you moved here to Washington, D.C. or to San Francisco or New York, and you go back home. The streets seem narrower. The people seem to be talking about the same things that they talked about before. What a bore. Hello, show me something new. Well, that's what I was always in search of. One night when I was working at a radio station here in the Washington, D.C. area, a couple of the engineers who were downstairs getting into mischief called me and said, "Come down, we want to show you something." And I said, okay. So I went downstairs, put on a long record, went downstairs, and they were sitting in front of an oscilloscope. Well, an oscilloscope is something that all engineers know about, and mechanics. But it allows you to see electrical impulses, blips, at different intervals on a spectrum. I knew what it meant. It meant that each one of those blips represented something. While we talked, I said, "What is that?" And they said, "We don't know where it's coming from," and they laughed at each other, "but we have an idea that someone over here is communicating with someone over here." And I said, "They're sending messages to each other and you're picking it up? How are you picking it up?" And they said, "Hello, it's a radio station. We're engineers. We know how to do that. We can tap in." And I looked at it and I said, "What does each one of those little blips represent?" And they said, "It could be a number, it could be a letter, it could be a phrase. We don't know, and that's what we're trying to figure out based on what we're seeing." When I looked at it, I thought to myself, this is radio. This is where we're going. And so one of the engineers said, "You know one thing? I think you'd better start looking for another job because this is the future." So I had an alternative. I could either learn more about that or I could just bide my time and see what was going to happen. Well, many things happened. Let me give an example of what happened. The stations that I worked in had turntables. Few stations have turntables now. They're just relics. We had tape decks, reel to reel. When was the last time I saw a tape deck? I don't know. Cart machines that played commercials. But over a period of time, all these things were replaced. And if you worked in radio then, and you think that you could go back into that type of scenario in a radio station today, then it's not going to work. You can't go back home again. You can't go back to that. You have to reinvent yourself in order to keep pace with what's going on. I had the fortune and the misfortune of being in that type of situation. I lost a very good job. I was at the height of my career. I was on fire. So they fired me. I sent tapes to everybody. I called everybody. I begged everybody. I said, please, you've got to give me a job. You don't know what it's like to be here at home doing nothing. You know me. Give me something to do. Nothing. So I spent a lot of time thinking. I got a part-time job at a TV station here in the Washington, D.C. area. And I thought, this would be great. They've got everything. This is TV. This is the top of it all. This is better than radio. For 3 years, I worked in that TV station, and I was not allowed to do anything but think. I would sit there at my desk on the 5th floor and look out the window at Tyson's Corner and say to myself, these people don't know who they're messing with. I am the incomparable James Jack. I know everything there is to know about radio. I know something that will really make them stand on their heads. We've got these videotapes. If we put them all together and play them back to back, it's all music. It's like stories and everything. It'll be exciting. This was just before VH1 or MTV. Didn't make any difference because I was just me, and I was not somebody from Madison Avenue or from Hollywood coming in to tell them this is the direction in which television is going. It didn't seem to matter at all. When I come back after this brief message, I'm going to tell you what I saw from about 1984. 1984, that rings a bell, doesn't it? From 1984 going forward with radio. As I said, we'll be right back.
Every day, computers help our lives and businesses run smoothly. And every day, they're potential targets. Viruses, spyware, and scams are relentlessly being updated, making it easier for hackers and thieves to steal information and control your computer. Protect yourself. Get in the habit of keeping your cybersecurity up to date. Learn how at StaySafeOnline.org today.
Welcome back. I'm glad to have you back. I'm James Jack, and this is Rock Your Block, and I'm the host of Homes Radio. Homes Radio. I love that word, but I didn't invent it. It just happened one day. People called the radio station when I was a disc jockey, and they would say, play something for me. I say, where are you? They say, I'm on the road. Where are you? I'm at home. Where are you? I'm this place or that place, because radio could go anywhere. But to me, radio was always at home. It started in the morning, it ended in the evening, and that's how I dealt with it. I talked to people on a one-to-one basis as if they were just getting up, having breakfast, getting the kids off to school, at work, coming home, getting ready to take a nightcap, and of course prepare for the next day. Homes radio, because homes is where the heart is. And I always felt that when I was on the air, I had to reach people where they were. But I wasn't working in radio in 1984. Couldn't get a job. I was working at a TV station. And I was on the 5th floor, and I remember during the winter, the airplane, the jet, Air 90, crashed into the 14th Street Bridge. I was standing there looking at the snow falling, and I was remembering a tune that our high school band used to play at football games called Visibility Zero. The phone rang, and it rang, and it rang. All the phones at the editor's desk were ringing. I said, something's up. I turned and I looked, and someone said, a jet has just hit the 14th Street Bridge, crashed. At that time, they sent a reporter named John Goldsmith to the scene. He was there almost all day. They have a battery of monitors there next to the editor's desk, and you can sit and watch everything. Not only what was happening at our station, but at the other stations too, and the network. I went over, I said, what can I do? What can I do? And they told me, you can't do anything. Go back over there and sit in your corner. So I went back and I stood there for a few minutes, and I was getting mad. So I decided that I would just take my little run of the station as I normally do. And I headed back to the tech's room, where there were even more monitors, probably 20 of them, where they monitored TV feeds from all over, everywhere. And I could see the carnage. I saw what the jet had done. I saw John Goldsmith arriving, and I said to myself, my goodness, I can see it all, but they can only see one at a time. Is the future the ability to see all of it? Does it all have to be controlled by one person or one thing, one channel? And I thought to myself, no. Just like this guy, Terry, sitting here, he sees it all. I can see it all too. It's amazing. The technology has moved that fast. Well, wouldn't you know it, while John Goldsmith was there, here comes Dan Rather. Blip! Dan Rather and CBS took over the signal. Well, they could do that. They have agreements like that. That meant that the powers that be were now in control, and they and their channels determined who could see this and who could see that. And I was saying to myself, I'm thinking like they are thinking. I know exactly what they're thinking. Let's look at every aspect of it and let's pull it all together. And my mind was just racing, even though I still felt like I had been put out to pasture. Eventually that passed. But what didn't pass was the onward march of technology. Eventually, I didn't really wind up back in radio for a while. I went back to school, and while I was in school, I was studying a lot of different things that were going on. I went on and got my degree in radio and television, and worked at the campus radio station, and you know, everything was just really happening. I was just really enjoying it, but I was also keeping up with current events. One of the things that I noticed that was happening was as the technology was moving forward, we were also enjoying some of the newer fruits of technology. And one of them was cellular technology. So on the weekends, I worked at this little station, and we would go out and do remotes, and we used telephones, because by that time we didn't have to microwave a signal back to the station and then send the signal back out through the antennas or whatever, through the towers. And I looked at it and I said to myself, I said, you know, one of these days radio is going to be in the TV. Not in the TV, but in the telephone. Yeah, right, okay. So the phones that we had were really big, huge. And I thought to myself, it should be smaller. And eventually they did get smaller. This is not my first one, but I like to sit on the shelf and look at it sometimes. I have one of the originals, the folders, the flips, not the big bag ones. But I would sit at it and look at it, and I'd say to myself, the same people who fired me probably are not thinking in terms of one day this will become the radio. And it has. But not only has that become the radio, but this has become it all. This is one of the first tablets. This is a Nokia 770, the predecessor of the iPad. I love this little guy. Why? It does everything. The videos, the internet, all of it. It's really obsolete now, but I still keep it there on the bedstand, or the nightstand as they say, because it has been replaced by R2-D2. That's right. I don't care what you call it. iPhone, what's the other one? You know what I mean. This is radio. This is TV. This is the newspaper. This is all of it. Everything is here. When I finished school and I came back home, I told my wife, who was having some problems herself, trying to move ahead in her company, we need to do real estate again. So she says, why? I said, because we're now in an upwards movement as far as the market is concerned, and we can make a lot of money. So she says, okay. I said, but one caveat. You can't do real estate the way you did years ago. Why? Because real estate has reinvented itself. Not only real estate, but just about every business there is. The medical profession, manufacturing, the car manufacturing business, everything has changed as a result of the computer. I don't have the computer with me, but as far as I'm concerned, this is my computer too. She knew very little about computers, but I taught her. And in the process of teaching her, I said, this is the direction in which real estate is going. So in order for us to capture our little segment of the market, we must be aware of everything that's going on. One of the first things that we did was we signed on to this little company, and you may have seen one of these little signs. This is not a plug for them. This is just an idea that they had, and when I drove by and I looked at it, I said, I know what this is. Unfortunately, they're using AM radio. That was before cellular technology had caught up with them. But we installed it in all the houses, and people would drive by and they would stop and listen to a 2-minute blip about the house, where we would literally walk them through the house. And in the living room, we have this. And in the dining room, we have this. And would you believe it, we have granite counters, and we have this in the kitchen. Everything that you want in this house. Call now, and you can have it. Just like that. This is how you get into the house. This is the technology that allows us to open the doors for you. But before you can get into the house, instead of you driving around looking at all the houses in the neighborhood and calling us and saying, you got to come over and look at this house, you got to come over and look at this house, we don't have to do that. Why? Because the market has changed so much until we don't have to do that. As far as real estate is concerned, doctors don't have to do it. A doctor in Turkey can now see an operation in Quebec because of the technology. Everything is reinventing itself. And that's what I thought I had to do. I had to be a brand new me at every stage. That brings me to this stage, doesn't it? Holmes Radio. It's me, reinvented, because I understand why it's necessary to get my point across in a way that people really understand, and also in a way that I like doing it. When I drive by a house now, and I see a house that's for sale, I take my phone and I aim it at the little QR cube. Looks like little scribbles and everything, and instantly it tells me what the house looks like, what it sells for, if there are offers on it, if it's under contract, how long it's been on the market, how old it is, everything I need to know. Not only that, I can push the button and it contacts the other agent or someone else who has the same technology, or they're using it on their Samsung or their iPhone or whatever. They can just and instantly tell me, I would like to see this house. No problem. If the agent that I'm working with is using the same technology, they can connect with us and walk through the house too. How can it happen? Well, the industry has reinvented itself. As one agent told me, she was walking through a house with a client, and when she walked outside, she called her client, the seller of the house, and he says, yes, I know. I saw you. She said, you saw us? He says, yes. As soon as you walked in, it rang my cell phone. I'm looking at you now. You're standing outside in the yard. Do they want to make an offer? And she was astounded. That's the direction in which we're going as far as technology goes. Now, I could call it Home's future, and talk about homes and things like that. But my heart is really in radio because I really like radio. And even though we've had a love-hate affair, for some reason, I'm willing to forgive her and let her fix me something to eat. No, I'm not a chauvinist. I'm a thinker. And I'm also a person who believes that when you watch this show, Homes Radio, it may not always be about real estate, but it will be sort of like a personal thing that I have with real estate and also the people who come on that I talk to. And for that reason, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my little story. Did I succeed? Oh, yes, I did. And will there be more? Maybe not about this stuff, but about homes and about radio. Thank you for being my guest today. I'm James Jack, and this has been Rock Your Block and the Homes Radio edition. You have a wonderful time doing what you like to do because that's what you like to do. Bye.